The year is 2007. Pokémon Rise of Darkrai dominates the film market in Japan, while we in the West can finally use our Sinnoh Pokémon on the big screen thanks to Pokémon Battle Revolution. Coincidentally, this is the first year we could use our Sinnoh Pokémon in the competitive card game as well, as the Diamond and Pearl base set had made its way into the standard rotation. These cards also made their way into the 2007 World Championships, hosted in the Hilton Waikoloa Village Hotel in Hawaii. This location would go on to host Worlds 2 more times, which is no surprise considering how great of an event it was. This event was the first time a big premier tournament like this was using the naming conventions of the Junior, Senior, and Master divisions as we have them today. This is the first time in the series we are going to look at the two Senior Division finalists, Jeremy Sharf Kim from the US and Akira Miyazaki from Japan. The Senior Division is an interesting and small window of time, being the division for those aged 11 to 14 years. As I said before though, being younger doesn't mean they couldn't bring their A game. For Jeremy Sharf Kim, bringing your A game meant the use of his Rambolt deck. This is usually the part of the video where I make a joke about how obvious the name of the deck is, but in reality, I don't understand what Rambolt means. I follow some people who know better than I do, but I got a little too embarrassed to ask. The Pokemon Company says the deck leans heavily on Banette EX and utility cards to nullify its opponents. To learn how this works, let's start by taking a look at Banette EX. Banette EX is the star of the show when it comes to Rambolt. It's only a Stage 1 Pokemon, meaning you can evolve into it insanely fast, and it's a hard hitter for sure. First off, it has the ability Shady Move, which allows you to move one damage counter from any Pokemon on the field to any other Pokemon on the field. This, being a Pokepower, can be used in addition to an attack, making it so if your cards are played right, you can net 2 KOs in one turn. The attack Banette EX has is Shadow Chant, which for 2 energy, does 30 damage, along with 10 more damage for every supporter in your discard pile. The Pokemon Company understood this was a really good move, so they limit its total damage to 90. The only big issue that Banette EX seems to have is its weakness to Dark, which Jeremy had covered with our next Pokemon. This deck isn't what I generally refer to as a well-oiled machine, or a deck where all cards work together for one central goal. Instead, it's Banette EX and its contingency plans. The most solid of these being within Lunatone. Lunatone's Pokebody Moonglow makes it so that every Soul Rock you have has a retreat cost of 0, which sounds situational, but it's actually really good in this deck. Its first attack is Foresight, which for 1 energy allows you to sort the top 5 cards of either player's deck. Rambolt relies on moving quickly, so this can either help you keep your deck's momentum, or at the very least keep your opponent from slowing you down. Its second attack, Target Beam, did 20 damage, with an additional 10 for every Soul Rock you have in play. Assuming you have a full bench of Soul Rocks, this move does 70 damage, which isn't insane for how much work that would require. What makes it good though, is that it's super effective to the ever so common Umbreon EX, which was a counter to all Psychic types. To get a shot at doing this damage though, you needed to get out Soul Rock. This deck actually benefits from having 2 different Soul Rocks. First is a Fighting type Soul Rock with the ability Luna Shade, which makes it so as long as you have Lunatone, non-EX, colorless Pokemon can't use any Pokepowers. This ability would have been really good if not for the EX stipulation, as Flygon EX was a very dominant colorless Pokemon in the meta. Why you keep this Soul Rock around though is its attack Call for Family. For only 1 energy, you get the chance to take a Lunatone from your deck and place it directly on your bench. You can also use Hyper Beam for 1 energy at a 50-50 shot at discarding your opponent's energy. Now that your Soul Rock has a 0 retreat cost, you can take it out and focus on getting out your other Soul Rock. Now being a Psychic type, the best aspect of this card is its ability Sunbeam, which makes it so your Lunatones now have 80 HP instead of 60. 20 HP on paper isn't crazy, but it can make a huge difference when this allows Lunatone to take 2 attacks from the Umbreons it intends to fight. Soul Rock also has the 1 energy move Scorching Light to either paralyze or burn the opponent, and the 1 energy Reflected Beam, which does 10 damage to 1 Pokemon on the opponent's bench for every one of your Lunatones. That's it for Pokemon in this deck, but I wanted to point out how cool it is to see Lunasoul decks from the past, considering these Pokemon still work together really well in the meta today. The first trainer card we're going to look at is actually something we don't see very often, a Pokemon Tool. This is an item you attach to one of your Pokemon that gives it some special effect. The buffer piece, the one seen in Rambolt, makes it so your Pokemon takes 20 less damage until the end of your opponent's next turn. This means if you need another turn to set things up, this card provides, a buffer. Considering this deck gets rolling so fast, this card allows you to either keep your opponent from stopping you, or keep your opponent from catching up. This slowing your opponent is a shared goal of this deck's main stadium as well. Crystal Beach not only came up in my now 2-year-old lore video, but also dominates decks that rely on special energy. This stadium makes it so that any card that provides 2 or more energy now only gives 1 colorless energy. This means that it may take an opponent an entire second turn to set up a Pokemon that only requires 2 energy. Rambolt doesn't have any of these doubles, sans 1 Holland's Magnemite, instead opting only to use Cyclone energy, which makes your opponent have to switch their active Pokemon once it's played. The final slot in my hypothetical playmat is filled with all of the different supporters in the deck. All of these different Holland cards allow you to either draw cards or search for specific ones from your deck. To make up for these particularly good effects, you have to discard a card from your hand to use them. Now, if you remember, Banette EX gets stronger with each supporter in your discard. So, not only do you get to draw 3 cards, but Banette EX gets stronger. And if you choose to discard another supporter from your hand, Banette EX gets even stronger. Once again, it caps out at 90 damage, but with this system in place, you can get there extraordinarily fast. Jeremy knew that there would be plenty of Banette EX decks at Worlds, and that he needed something to differentiate his strategy. This is why he brings in the Lunasol aspect as to cover potential blind spots. This addition of contingency plans is what brought him all the way to the grand finals of the Pokemon World Championship without needing any of those new Sinnoh Pokemon. This contrasts Akira Miyazaki and their Swift Empoleon deck. The Pokemon Company points out that Swift Empoleon leans heavily on trainer cards, with a few yet very powerful water Pokemon. This deck is what is referred to as a single prize deck, meaning that it has no special rulebox Pokemon that make it so your opponent can take 2 prize cards when they get a KO. These aspects allow for the deck to have an advantage over most other decks, especially those that had any semblance of fire. The firefighting Lieutenant Casey of the deck was found in the Empoleon line. This ace is unique in that every evolutionary stage has something special about it. Piplup has the move Peck, which doesn't require any energy and does 10 damage, along with Water Splash, which for 2 energy can do a possible 30 damage. Nothing special there, but what makes this starter special is it has 60 HP. This was above average for a basic Pokemon, or at least one that had 2 evolutions. This made it so your Piplup had a higher chance of surviving the early game, allowing you to evolve it into Prinplup without issue. Prinplup, despite not being the namesake, is probably the reason it's called Swift Empoleon. The move Aqua Shower does 10 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon for only 1 energy. Then you can use the move Brine for 2 energy to deal 40 damage to any Pokemon that's been hurt before. These moves allow you to both spread a little bit of damage to all Pokemon, but also target a specific one to make a quick and clean KO. The ability to deal a little bit of damage to all Pokemon time after time again makes it so that when you're ready to attack, you can swiftly sweep through them all with Empoleon. Empoleon is simultaneously bulky and a harsh attacker. Its first move, Ice Blade, does the exact same thing as Brine for the same energy, but doesn't require the Pokemon to have already been damaged. Then the biggest hitter, Aqua Jet, which only requires 1 more energy and deals 70 damage to the defending Pokemon. Then, assuming you flip heads, you can deal 20 damage to any opposing benched Pokemon. If you already dealt a hefty amount of damage with Prinplup's Aqua Shower, then this 20 damage may be enough to net 2 KOs in 1 turn. To assure you were able to get all of the Piplups you needed, Corsola was a necessity. Corsola, for 1 colorless energy, is able to use Cry for Help to get any water or fighting Pokemon into your hand. Additionally, it knows Double Attack, which allows you to deal 10 damage to 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon, fitting in perfectly with the only other Pokemon in this deck. Consistency is actually a huge part of this deck, as they saved a lot of space for trainer cards with so few Pokemon. Celio's Network is the perfect card for a single prize deck like this, allowing the user to search their deck for any Pokemon as long as it isn't a Pokemon EX. This is the same job that Corsola does, but doesn't cost an energy and can be done in addition to other attacks. This is just one of many consistency cards found in the deck, but there being so many consistency cards didn't mean there wasn't room for some more offensive trainer cards. Cessation Crystal is another Pokemon tool, this one making it so that if the wearer is active, no Pokepowers or Pokebodies can be used. If you didn't notice, no Pokemon in this deck have any abilities, meaning this can't hurt you and can only stop your opponent. Similarly, we see the Cursed Stone Stadium make a return this year, with its ability to do 10 damage every turn to all Pokemon with Poké Powers. This is almost comedically in line with the deck's main mechanics, as now we have 3 different cards that do 10 damage to multiple Pokemon at once. And once again, there are no repercussions as there aren't any Poké Powers in this deck. Finally is the Scramble Energy. This energy would provide 1 colorless energy to an evolved Pokemon, which isn't very cool. But if you had more prize cards than your opponent, it would provide 3 of any energy to the Pokemon. The most required energy for any given attack in the deck is 3, meaning with 1 card, you could use any attack you wanted. Also, because the goal of this deck is to slowly whittle away at your opponent until you take all your prizes in 1 swift move at the end, you'll more than likely always have more prize cards than your opponent. That was really all there is to know about Swift Empoleon. It uses Prinplup to take its time whittling away at all of the opponent's Pokemon before evolving into Empoleon and cleaning them all up. In the meantime, the lack of Poké Powers allowed for a plethora of tools to keep your opponent from disrupting the ambush. So, how did it do at disrupting Rambold? Let's take a look. So possibly due to the fact that the participants were children, there weren't any elaborate blog posts written about the event, but thanks to the Pokemon TCG archive on YouTube, there was footage saved of the Grand Finals match. Admittedly, I can't tell what's happening for most of it as the footage isn't very high quality, but at the very least I will play it alongside my explanation as it's an amazing piece of Pokemon history. The first thing to discuss is the different setup times for each deck. Rambold intends to have a fully evolved Pokemon out and fighting, sometimes as early as turn 2, and in the matchup that has no dark types, it can lean even heavier on Banette EX. Swift Empoleon, contrastingly, takes longer to get fully evolved by choice, as Prinplup is able to spread damage out effectively to prepare for Empoleon. This speedy setup forces Akira to evolve their Empoleon earlier, as leaving out a weaker Pokemon can result in an early loss. This makes it harder to utilize Empoleon's strength, especially with items like the buffer piece. Next, we can look at consistency cards, which are essentially the same between the two decks, except Banette EX can benefit from them more, lending Rambold another point. Even down to stadiums, Cursed Stone's potential 10 damage per turn on Banette EX is incomparable to Crystal Beach nullifying Empoleon's Scramble energy. At the end of the Grand Final set, Akira Miyazaki found his back against the wall. His Empoleon was almost gone, and he didn't have the firepower to finish off Banette EX for the win. Knowing there were no options left, he ended his turn and surrendered the World Champ title to Jeremy Schaefer Kim. Both players brought amazing decks, and put up really good fights, but in the end there could only be one winner, and it was Rambold. This was a bittersweet victory for Banette EX, as it's the final time we'll be seeing this rendition of a Pokemon EX in the Grand Finals of the World Championship. At least they got to go out on top. Next year will actually be the last year any EX era cards are allowed in at all, which will truly mark the end of an era. But that's a story for another day. Until that time comes, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It's free, so you'll always get your money's worth.